A Quiet Place is directed by John Krasinski and stars him and Emily Blunt. Now, I'm keeping this review spoiler-free, so I gotta be very careful with what I say, but what I will say is that I was pleasantly surprised with this film. The story is about a family, the Abbott family, who have for some time adapted to this life of seclusion and silence. The reason for the silence is because in this time, the land is now inhabited by these hostile creatures that have heightened hearing, and the slightest noise would bring doom, death, and despair. A lot of people will say that the first half of this film really drags and it's very slow, but in my honest opinion, I think that it sets the tone really well. It's not often that I go to watch a film that is for the most part quiet, so it felt new and eerie sitting in the theater. And I should say as a side note that I was lucky enough to be in a theater where the audience was very well mannered. There was no distractions from crying babies or a talking couple. And that being said, when watching this particular film, it would be very important for the viewer to have their experience the same way. So during this first half of the film, we're already placed in this post-apocalyptic scenario. Besides some newspaper clippings and some notes written on a dry erase board, there are no scenes that lead up to their present time, and it's as if the family already has grown accustomed to their new habits. One of the children, played by Millicent Simmons, is deaf in the movie as well as in real life, so sign language would be the primary source of communication throughout the majority of the film. And it seems that the family has already set up their life pretty well and secure. Everything from soundproof walls to placing sand under walkways and eating nothing but soft foods. It got me really thinking about what I would do in a scenario like this. I mean, I'll be honest, I've pictured myself in certain apocalyptic scenarios, such as, let's say, a zombie apocalypse. I would like to believe that I could go pretty far, but when in scenarios like this, where I have to stay quiet for the remainder of my life, I had to question, would I really survive long for that? I mean, I love crunchy foods. Considering how much of the story and film is heavily relied on sound, or the lack thereof, I felt there were definitely extremes. There'd be scenes where you hear nothing but nature. Some scenes would be accompanied by one of those sad, melancholy violins. It felt very similar to that game, This War Is Mine. If you haven't played it, it's very much like that. There'd also be scenes where the film puts us in the perspective of Millicent Simmons' character, where you hear absolutely nothing. It's completely mute. And I found those scenes very unsettling, but in a very good way. Now, when I mention extremes, is that when there's a sudden sound, it's very loud. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There are jump scares in this movie, and there's a lot of them. So you can imagine, I was sitting in the theater, I went to see this film by myself, and I was seated in between two couples. Both again were very well mannered, and so when jump scares appeared on the screen, I couldn't help but shake my whole body. And observing the two couples, again, you know, they didn't let out a single peep, and it was probably because they had the comfort of, you know, their significant other. But no, not me. You know, I was there having to endure all this terror by myself. But observing the levels of noise brought to these certain sounds, I couldn't help but think that, was it because my ears were adjusted to the quietness of the film, or did the film intentionally make these certain sounds noticeably loud? Either way, it definitely helped set up certain scenes. So the first half of this film, sure, it's very quiet for the most part, and it was slow in some parts, but it also provided character development. And it wasn't until the second half where you're now in this gripping, tension-filled scenario. Obviously, I won't mention what happens here, but I will say that I haven't felt this scared in a theater in a very long time. And I'm pretty sure during this second half that for the majority of the film, I had my hand over my mouth as if I was trying to keep as quiet as the characters. Now let's talk about the creatures in this movie. Now obviously I won't mention what they are exactly. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people who have already seen this movie will say that they are this or that. And not to mention that John Krasinski himself has actually stated what they are. But when it comes to the film, we're just observing the film in that throughout the whole entire movie, it never directly tells the audience what they are. And I found this really interesting because in most creature films, the main focus would be on the creature and what it is exactly, the whole mystery of it. But in this movie, the focus is not on the creature, but on the family instead. One thing I'll mention about these creatures, though, is that when they do show them, and I'm not talking about an arm or a leg here, when they actually show the creature in its full form, it looks good. I mean, like, the CGI looks scary, realistically good. And whoever designed these creatures, kudos to you, you are doing something right. So as I mentioned, the focus isn't exactly on the creatures, but on the family instead. And let me tell you that this cast was brilliant. From the opening scene, you see the love that holds them together, as well as the despair when trying to live in the world that they're in. And the husband and wife are played by John Krasinski and Emily Blunt, who are married in real life. Now, usually I would have a problem with these kind of movies where they would cast real life Hollywood couples. One example is the movie Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I just found it weird to see these real life Hollywood couples doing real life couple things on film, and made me feel like a voyeur. But I will say that I did not feel that way during this film. And maybe it was because of the plot and setting, but I really felt for these characters. Millicent Simmonds' character in this film also has a younger brother played by Noah Jupe. And for the majority of the film, they are together. And it kind of reminds me of many other families where there's more of a connection between the siblings as opposed to the children's connection with the parents. And that's not at all to say there's no connection between the kids and the parents in this film, but their performance shines more when these two young actors are together. On a side note, I read up that these characters have names in the film, although I don't really remember them. Maybe it's because, you know, they were quiet most of the time, but maybe they mentioned it once during the film, but for the most part they were just using pronouns. And though the performance of these two young actors shine most when they are together, I will say that there are a couple scenes with Millicent Simmonds' character and John Krasinski's character, the father-daughter, where it was really heartfelt, you know, and I can't say more than that, obviously, but I just have to say that you need to watch this film and just see what it is I'm talking about. Overall, I really enjoyed this experience. A lot of people are saying that it seems that there's a trend that's about to happen here with actors that have a comedy background making great thrillers. First was Jordan Peele, who made Get Out, which was another brilliant film, and now we have John Krasinski with A Quiet Place. And it makes me think that when can I expect Charlie Day to make the next great thriller? I'd like to see that. Also, I mentioned in an earlier video that I believe that Western cinema is in trouble and has been in trouble for the longest time. What with Hollywood cashing in on reboots and unnecessary sequels, I found it refreshing to see that there are still very innovative and original ideas, such as A Quiet Place, being placed on screen. So now that you know my general thoughts of this film, I want to know what you thought of it. So if you watched the movie, let me know what you thought of it in the comment section down below. But in the meantime, if you enjoyed this review, please leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit subscribe for more quality content. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Mixed Masters, and I'll see you in the next video.